So now let's move on to part 2. Before we go to part 2, let's recap first what you have been taught in part 1. The first one, you get the concept of diffusion. Alright, so you did learn about the partial pressure gradient is very important, and it's play a crucial role to ensure that the gas being diffused from the regions that is higher in concentrations, higher in the partial pressure gradient, to the lower in the partial pressure gradients. It's not only in from the atmosphere but throughout in the body system. Okay, and then you did learn that what are the transport that carry these oxygens in your circulatory system. Either di jalan kaki, which is dissolved in the plasma, or a second option, either they're being transported by the hemoglobin. Okay, so they bind with the hemoglobin and etc. And then what is the form of the hemoglobins that we have? So we have a certain types of hemoglobins. What are the difference of the hemoglobin? And then we do know that oxygens bind with the hemoglobin, but how much the oxygens binding to the hemoglobin, we come to the saturations of the hemoglobin. So when we have the amount of the oxygens that bind to the hemoglobins, you did know about the partial pressure of the oxygen. So we combine these two informations, we come up with one graph which is known as the oxygen hemoglobin dissociation curve. So this oxygen hemoglobin dissociation curve telling you the importance that at what partial pressure, what is the response of the hemoglobin? Either it's going to lose the oxygens or either it's going to keep the oxygens. Okay, so we're done with that part. Now let's move on to the carbon dioxide transport. So that's in this part we're going to learn how does this carbon dioxide been transported in our circulatory system. So dia punya transportation system lah, kenderaan rasmi untuk carbon dioxide ni macam mana pula. Okay, we finish on the oxygens, we move to the carbon dioxide. Alright, so now before we go further, let's recap on the partial pressure of the carbon dioxide first. So we do know that the carbon dioxide, so from here, it is actually 0.04% in total. Okay, when you tambah ni per 100, dia ada 0.04%. But when you count their barometric pressure, they are actually only 0.3 millimeter of mercury. Okay, so let's move on to this one, the light blue or the bright blue. Mesti tak cakap. So the atmospheric air, it is 0.3. In the humidified air, still it is 0.3. In the alveolar air, it is 40. So right now we do know that there are actually 40 millimeter of mercury of carbon dioxide. The atmosphere 0.3 je. When it come into the alveolar, it is 40%. So how does this 40% come in? It's actually showing you that in the alveolar, the oxygen, the carbon dioxide from the tissue are already being given to the alveoli. Dia pass ke alveoli. That's why the partial pressure of the carbon dioxide in the alveoli is 40%. But when you expel the carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, why it not become 40%? Kenapa dia 27% sahaja? So because in the atmosphere, okay, you only consist of 0.3. Okay, when you expel 40%, dia tambah produk erat bahagi, dia dah dilute and it become 27% only. Okay, in the atmosphere, in the expired air. Okay. Oh, yeah. Before we go to the carbon dioxide, kita tengok dekat oxygen dulu. The alveolar air of the oxygen is 104. When you expired air, maksudnya you hembus nafas, the content of the oxygen is actually 120 mm mercury. Banyak lagi content of oxygen in the expired air. That's why you boleh buat CPR ke orang untuk bagi oxygen. Okay. So that is the reasons behind the CPR. Nanti aku cakap, saya buat CPR dekat dia, saya hembuskan carbon dioxide dekat dia. Boleh ke orang tu? Tu taklah sebenarnya. The only oxygen that being taken by your tissue is only 25%. You patah balik, you hantar balik 75% lagi. Maksudnya apa? Yang you bawa 100% oksigen kan, you bagi dekat tissue kan. Berapa banyak yang you bagi? 25% saja. You bawa balik oksigen tu berapa persen? 75%. 75% tu yang you bagi dekat yang orang yang you CPR tadi. So that's why there is still enough oxygen to be given in that way lah. Alright. So back to the carbon dioxide transport. Take a look at the partial pressure of the carbon dioxide. It is 40 mm mercury. In the arterial blood, it is still 40 millimeter of mercury. Okay, but when in the venous blood, in the tissue, just now I did mention that its partial pressure is 45. Okay, 45 dekat tissue. In the blood, it is 40. So, yang mana tinggi? The tissue is higher compared to the arterial blood. So, carbon dioxide tu akan patah balik dah pergi dekat blood. And then 45% tu dah dia akan bawa sampai lah ke alveoli. Kemudian dekat alveoli 45% in the pulmonary capillary. Dekat alveoli tadi 40%, jadi dia akan give to the alveoli and then hembus keluar. Okay. So now let's move on to the carbon dioxide transport. How does this carbon dioxide being delivered to the tissue? So oxygens are 2 only, but for carbon dioxide we have 3 forms. So carbon dioxide ni lagi hebat lah, dia ada 3 kenderaan rasmi dia. So number 1 is similar to the oxygens by which they are diffused in the plasma. Okay, but somehow plasma just now we did mention is only 1.5% being diffused. But for carbon dioxide, it is 20 times much higher compared to the oxygens. Why? Because carbon dioxide solubility is higher comparing to the oxygens. Okay, so dissolved carbon dioxide is greater than dissolved oxygens. And a second manner is via bicarbonate, and the third one via Carbamino protein. Okay, now we're done with the dissolved one. Let's move on to the second transportation system, which is bicarbonate. So how does this carbon dioxide being transported as bicarbonate? So we do know that carbon dioxide, when they meet water, they're going to change their character. So they're going to make reaction. So carbon dioxide, when they meet water molecule, so dalam badan kita ni ada banyak water molecule. Dalam red blood cell kita pun ada water molecule. So this carbon dioxide, when meet water, they will form carbonic acid. So this is carbonic acid. So this process actually can occur by themselves, but with the presence of enzyme, which is known as the carbonic anhydrase, it will speed up the process, right? In this process, when we put a double arrow like this, so means that it is reversible process. So, bicarbonic acid are actually the acid that is unstable. So what does that mean by unstable? So it cannot form as it is. So it's going to break up. Dia tak sukalah pasangan yang tidak serasi. Okay, so they will break up and they will form hydrogen ion as well as bicarbonate ion. Alright, they will form a 2 ion, which is hydrogen ion as well as the bicarbonate ion. Okay, they akan split up. So what about this hydrogen pula nanti? Nanti kita akan tengoklah fate of hydrogen ni. Alright, so come back to here, we start with this blue region. In this blue region, it's showing you that at tissue level, the partial pressure of the carbon dioxide is 45 kan. Dekat arterial blood, partial pressure of carbon dioxide is 40 kan. Jadi from high to lower concentration, so dia akan bergerak, carbon dioxide ni nanti akan bergerak pergi ke low partial pressure. Okay, ni carbon dioxide ni tadi daripada tisu, dia akan keluar pergi interstitial fluid, masuk dekat dalam plasma. But then, once in plasma, what will happen to this carbon dioxide? It will go to the red blood cells. So bear in mind that in our red blood cells, back to the reaction that I mentioned earlier, they have a water molecule. So this carbon dioxide, dia suka dengan air tadi. So they will bond with water molecule and they will form carbonic acid. But bear in mind, I did mention that this carbonic acid are actually unstable. This process can occur by themselves, but somehow it can speed up the process when the carbonic anhydrase is present. So this carbonic anhydrase will speed up the process to perform the carbonic acid. This carbonic acid is unstable, they will break up. Alright, they will split up. Okay, when they split up, they will form the hydrogen ion as well as the bicarbonate form. So right now we do have the H plus ion. Apa maksudnya bila awak ada banyak H plus ion? Bila awak ada banyak carbon dioxide masuk ke dalam ni, awak ada banyak H plus ion. You will increase the acidity of the red blood cell. Do you still remember that the shift to the right, when I said that when there is increase in acidity, the graph will shift to the right? What's that mean when the graph is shift to the right? So it means that it's easily gonna give oxygen. Hemoglobin tu dia tak nak bind lah dengan oksigen tadi, dia nak senang nak bagi oksigen. So the presence of the hemoglobin right here may influence the release of the hemoglobin with the oxygen. Dalam ni tadi, at the beginning, hemoglobin ni, HB ni, dia bind dengan oksigen. But then when this hydrogen ion is increased, so this hemoglobin will release the oxygens and they will give oxygens to the tissue. That's how the process going on lah. So hemoglobin ni akan bagi oksigen. Ambil dah oksigen ni. Dah banyak sangat carbon dioxide acid ni, tak boleh nak duduk dah panas. So dia nak bagi oksigen. When they give oxygen, the hemoglobin right now are free. Okay, this hemoglobin right now are free. Ni hemoglobin dah free. So what will happen to this hemoglobin? Free hemoglobin is actually acting like a buffer system. So dia nampak hydrogen ion ni berlega-lega seorang diri, dia pun tangkap hydrogen ion ni forming HB. Alright. So why does hemoglobin need to bind to the H+? That is because it's going to reduce the acidity of the red blood cells to maintain the homeostatic, the osmolarity of the red blood cell. So they're going to bind with this H+, and this hemoglobin right now are acting like a buffer system. Buffer tu apa? Buffer tu nak normalize balik lah. Okay. Alright, we done with this H+. What about the carbonic acid? So carbonic acid, bicarbonate ion. What happened to this bicarbonate ion? This bicarbonate ion actually cannot stand in the red blood cells. Too negative in the red blood cell is very, very bad. So what will happen to this bicarbonate ion? They're going to undergo shift with the chloride. They are going out from the red blood cell. They don't want to live in the red blood cells. They want to be in the plasma. So this one going to be shifted out. They will be shifting with the chloride ion. So this process we call it as the chloride shift. Okay, chloride masuk, bicarbonate keluar. Okay, so this is the process that happened in the internal respiration. So how does the oxygen being given to the red blood cell? Due to the partial pressure gradient. Okay, so what happened to the carbon dioxide? They meet water and they change their character and blah 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 and produce acid. So when they produce acid, what happened to the character of the hemoglobin? Oxyhemoglobin tend to be hot and tend to release the oxygen. So what will happen to this oxygen? High oxygens in this region, low oxygens in this region. So oxygen will be diffused into the tissue via the pressure gradient. So this hemoglobin, what going on to it? It's going to bind as a buffer system. Then what will happen to the bicarbonate? Bicarbonate cannot stand negative in the red blood cells so long. So they're going to shift out into the plasma with the chloride. Okay, so this process known as the chloride shift. Boleh? Okay. So the third one, we ada the Carbamino protein. Yang tadi ni kita tengah cakap now. So we now move on the Carbamino protein. In the Carbamino protein, this carbon dioxide going to bind with the hemoglobin, forming Carbamino hemoglobin. Okay. So in the delivery of the carbon dioxide, so basically we have 49 milliliter of the carbon dioxide in the arterial blood. But when it being delivered into the tissue, or being taken up by the tissue, all the carbon dioxide being carried in the venous blood as 53 milliliter. So 53 dalam venous, 49 dalam arterial. Tolak lah berapa oksigen yang tisu, berapa carbon dioxide yang tisu tu buat adalah lebih kurang 4 milliliter. Okay, so in these structures, in this table, it's going to show you the in this form, in this three form, the first option, second option and third option, in this three transportation option, ketiga method tadi, which one carry the most carbon dioxide? So it's actually as a bicarbonate. Alright? Okay. So just now I did mention that when increase in pH, then the hemoglobin are easily to give the oxygens away. That one I mentioned as a Bohr effect. So right now in this one, when they reduce oxygen binding affinity for the carbon dioxide, okay, maksudnya due to the H+ increase carbon dioxide nak bagi tu, this one is known as the Haldane effect. Okay, this is the same thing I did mention just now. Okay. So if you take a look at the blood capillary, you will have 70% of the bicarbonate formed in the red blood cells. It will enter plasma. So means that you forming a bicarbonate ion. So this bicarbonate ion will undergo chloride shift, right, into the plasma, right? The chloride will get in, right? So the amount of the bicarbonate in the plasma is basically 70%. Okay. Dia keluar lah, dia duduk kat plasma tu 70%, bawa pergi ke lung tadi. Dia duduk dalam plasma, dia tak duduk dalam red blood cell. Memang dia bawa sebagai bicarbonate, but it does not in the red blood cell, but it's in the plasma. Okay, that's why if you take a look at the venous blood tu maksudnya blood daripada vein lah, deoxygenated blood tu, you will see that they have a high chloride content dekat dalam venous blood tadi. Sebab dia dibawa sebagai chloride kan, dia tak bawa red blood cell tu, tak bawa sebagai bicarbonate, dia bawa sebagai chloride. Alright, so chloride content in the venous blood is greater than the arterial blood. That's why they will increase their osmolarity. So when they increase in the osmolarity due to the presence of the chloride, so they will tend to take a lot of water. So it will increase water uptake. That's why if you take a look at the venous blood, their RBC is slightly bigger, gemuk, fatter than in the arterial blood. If you come from the hematocrit, you will see that it is 3% greater lah. Alright, so now let's move on to the fate of the carbon dioxide when it reached to the alveolus. Just now, this one is actually at the tissue level. Okay, yang ni pun tadi I did mention at the tissue level. So when it's travel, blah 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 blah, until it reach the alveoli, what will happen to the carbon dioxide is that way. Okay, so in the carbon dioxide, right? You have, okay, we start from the alveolus. In the carbon dioxide plot, in the alveolus, we start from the in this alveolus first, in the lung, in this region lah. Okay, so oxygens in the alveolus is higher in pressure gradient, right? Comparing in the pulmonary capillary that receive to the being delivered into the lungs, right? So in the pulmonary capillary, in the deoxygenated blood, the partial pressure of the oxygens is lesser comparing to the alveolus. So it will move diffuse into the pulmonary capillary. So when these oxygens are present in this pulmonary capillary, 1.5% will be dissolved in the plasma, but the rest it will start to find the hemoglobin to bind. But bear in mind that just now I did mention that the hemoglobin that goes to the alveoli from the tissue is actually binding with the H plus as the buffer system. Right? Tadi saya cakap kan, hemoglobin ni dia bind dengan H plus sebab dia nak bagi oksigen tadi kan. So, in the alveoli, what will happen is that when there is a presence of the oxygen, this hemoglobin start to give away the H plus. Dia tak nak lah H plus ni, bukan pasangan yang serasi dia lah. It is the oxygen. So, they start to leave or give away this hemoglobin and they start to bind with the oxygen. So when they start with the oxygen, they become the oxyhemoglobin. They become oxyhemoglobin. Then they will release the H plus. What will happen to this H plus? This H plus will start go and find the carbonate ion. Jadi carbonate ion ni bukan dekat plasma ke tadi? Masa dia being delivered tadi? 70% tadi? Yes, it is. But then, it's undergo the chloride shift back lah. Dia adalah proses reversible. And sometimes, 30% lagi tu ada dekat dalam red blood cell kan, cuma 70% being diffused into the plasma. So this 70%, sorry 30% pun dia boleh bind. So this H plus going to bind with the to the bicarbonate, forming the bicarbonate acid and then get back into the H2O and also carbon dioxide. Therefore, they will increase the carbon dioxide content and this carbon dioxide will be diffused from higher gradient in the pulmonary capillary back to the lower gradient of carbon dioxide in the alveolus. So that's how the process going on between the oxygens and also carbon dioxide. Okay, this is just a similar process, dissociation curve, we need to know this. So this is the buffering system in the blood. The first one is the plasma protein. Okay, the plasma itself lah, protein in the plasma itself will bind to the acidic concentration. Then we have the hemoglobin and the next one we have the carbonic acid system. Okay, so here is the examples of the one condition that rarely occur but it is there. So it is the carbon monoxide poisoning. So basically, comparing to the carbon monoxide and carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide can bind with the hemoglobin greater. Means that carbon monoxide affinity towards the hemoglobin is very very high. That's why with the presence of carbon monoxide, this hemoglobin cannot take oxygen. Dia lagi suka kepada carbon monoxide. Sebab tu orang yang kena exposed to carbon monoxide banyak, dia susah nak bernafas lah sebab hemoglobin tu lagi tend nak pergi carbon monoxide comparing to oxygen. Okay, boleh buat mati lah. Okay. Sorry. Okay, another condition. Now this is just a graph that's showing the hemoglobin saturation comparing between the oxyhemoglobin and carbon monoxide dengan hemoglobin. Okay, so now let's take a look at another condition, which is effect of breath holding. So we have a conditions by which sometimes we try to breathe. Kita main apa, selam-selam kan dalam swimming pool, kita tengok siapa yang sedam lagi lama kan. Okay, contoh. So we make a breath holding, but bear in mind that when at certain point we try to hold our breath at certain point, the holding can be break, overridden. Dia ada breaking point dia. Maksudnya kita tak bertahan dah, kita terus tercungap-cungap macam macam tu kan. So why that voluntary control is being overridden? There is a breaking point. So what is that breaking point? So that breaking point is actually coming from the partial pressure of the carbon dioxide. So when you have high concentrations of carbon dioxide in your bodies, but you tak breathe in and breathe out, kan, you holding breath, your tissue, your process, keep going on the process and producing carbon dioxide a lot more and a lot more, right? So your body start to have higher concentrations of carbon dioxide, by which is a condition known as the acute hypercapnia. So when you fall out of oxygen, so your voluntary control can be overridden and it's automatically get back by the autonomic control. So now another case is the hyperventilation. So hyperventilation means that the person breathe heavily. Dia bernafas kerap-kerap. So where does this condition can occur? For example, like stress ke, orang tu overexcited ke, dia takut ke, anxiety ke, this can occur lah, hyperventilation. So when you hyperventilate, you cannot, you breathe in too fast, so the oxygen exchange, the gases exchange system not occur normally. Okay, I think that's all for the lecture today, but I have a few more content for you to just read through for your own knowledge. So whatever it is, keep yourself healthy, keep the COVID away. Make sure that you have get your booster. It does not matter with the COVID infections, but the post-COVID syndrome is very, very bad. So make sure you have a healthy life and keep the SOP lah. Alright, I think that's all for today. Thank you very much and have a nice day ahead.